The griffin is a legendary creature in many mythologies. It is typically depicted with the body of the lion and head and wings of an eagle. It is obsessed with gold and has a very weird physical appearance. They are generally depicted with 4 legs, 2 wings, a beak, with eel-like talons in place of the lion's forelegs, and feathered, equine-like ears jutting from the skull. Among the few variations are those claiming that only the females had wings, and those indicating that the griffin's tails are serpent-like. Griffins are often found in mythologies of Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cultures, and are portrayed earlier on as gritty monsters which hide in gold veins, or later on as brave and virtuous beasts, paragons of virtue. But where did these creatures originate? Let's take a look. The griffin most likely originated in the Levant, the region on the eastern banks of the Mediterranean. Records attest to it being talked about in the region as early as the 2nd millennium BC. That's between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. The griffin really spread across Europe and Asia in the 14th century BC, however, developing 2 distinct forms, the European Minoan griffin, which had a spiraled mane, and the Asiatic Scythian griffin, which had a crested head. And the Scythians will come up later, so remember them. The Iron Age hit, and with it came an evolution in griffinology. In Greece, the creature adopted a sacred role. In Egypt, it was often paired with the Sphinx, while the Asian variant became tied to the Scythian people, a nomadic warrior tribe in Central Asia, as griffins were commonly found in stories around there, and in that region people would even first start believing that griffins were real living creatures. The Achaemenid Persian Empire prominently featured griffins in their art. Some even believe that griffins were worshipped as gods, though there is no evidence suggesting that. The largest bronze Islamic statue of the medieval world was of a griffin, and the griffin was adopted by Christians as its part earthly, part heavenly origins reminded them of Jesus. As such, the griffin became a major part of medieval Christian beliefs and cemented their place within Abrahamic religions. In the 11th century, the griffin would yet change again, as when the Republic of Genoa became a major naval force on Italy, they adopted the griffin in their coat of arms, starting a new heraldry tradition of the griffin representing honor, virtue, and bravery. This is the last major change that the griffin has had to it up to this point. There is one part of griffin lore that always boggles the mind. Early on in griffinology, the creature is obsessed with gold. It hoards it, it collects it, and it will attack anyone who gets too close to it. However, later, the griffin was adopted as a symbol for bravery, honor, and virtue, all seemingly running counter to the earlier messages of greed and mostly anger and very bad things in general. Why was it the Greeks and Scythians interpreted it the way they did, and why did the church change it? To solve these questions, we have to take a trip back in time to the city of Halicarnassus at the height of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, as it is here where Herodotus lived. He was a scholar. He was a liar. He even started the Western canon of history. But that's not what we care about. No, instead we care about Herodotus for a very different reason. His book is the first written evidence of people believing griffins were real that has survived to this day, as Herodotus does reference an earlier tome which has been, unfortunately, lost to history. At this point, the griffin shifts. No longer are they mythological beasts, never seen, not real. Now they're real animals, native to Central Asia, especially Mongolia. How is that shift made? Well, there's a theory, though keep in mind it is just that, first popularized by folk scientist Adrian Major, who believes that the ancient Scythians and Greeks were the world's first fossil hunters. Let me explain. The Protoceratops is a dinosaur, or rather was, as you may have guessed from the name. They lived during the Upper Cretaceous period and were common in Mongolia. They look quite similar to descriptions of the Asiatic griffin, which in modern day have completely overtaken the Minoan griffin, with a beak, a pointy frill, 4 legs, a crested head, and a long body. How is any of this relevant? Well, the Scythians inhabited the Mongolian region and would often mine for gold there. It is likely that when they were mining for gold, they would have found the skeletons of Protoceratopses over and over again. From there, it isn't too much of a stretch to assume that the Scythians interpreted these as mythical griffins, thus starting both the depictions of being real creatures and greedy gold lovers. The Scythians did not keep written records, so we don't know much about them. Eventually, Scythians made contact and traded with the Greeks, and that's when griffins first make it into a written source, the same tome that Herodotus referenced as real creatures. The evidence all seems to line up. However, there are some problems with this hypothesis. Most notably, the problem of why the Scythians would take a skeleton and assume it was a real creature when it was clearly ancient. However, it still is one of the best options we have for the ancient interpretation of the griffin. This doesn't answer our second question, however. The character of the griffin, still thought of as a real creature, completely shifted. Unfortunately, this one has a much more boring answer. To put it simply, Herodotus and other writers were, well, not read during the medieval era, when the meaning of the griffin changed. Herodotus slowly faded out of memory, and with him went the griffin's more greedy, more sinful origins. To recap, the griffin was a mythological creature. By the time of Herodotus, it had been viewed as a real animal for centuries. It gained a place in both Islam and Christianity, was tied to heraldry by the Genoese, which brings us to today. In conclusion, griffins are fascinating creatures with unique origin and fascinating appearances. Yes, I said fascinating twice, and I don't care about it. I have loved learning about it, and I hope you do too. As always, I am Tristan, and this has been a look at the griffins, noble creature or frightening beast.